What's up, y'all? I'm tired of using all the default wavetables for all the tutorials that I do, so my solution for that is going to be I'm going to upload my personal folder of wavetables to a Google Drive file, and then anybody that wants to use that for anything that they're doing, feel free. But at the same time, that prevents me from being limited to just what we get as the default wavetables for any sense. So that's the first thing. And then second of all, I've seen the different content people have made on how to make a good wavetable, and I feel like it's kind of lacking in a lot of different ways. So what I'm going to do with this video is go through from worst to best the ways that I've seen people make wavetables online, and also give tips on how to make wavetables using those different methods that I've seen. Because a lot of the tutorials that I found were, here's how you can make a wavetable, and they just show like you import a sample and then you have a wavetable. It's like, no, that's step one, but there's other things that you can do to make it even better. And some videos are a lot better than others, but I did feel like there was a general lack of decent wavetable creation videos out there. So with that being said, we're going to start things off with my wavetable creator preset, and it's very simple. All it is an LFO over the wavetable position, right? So whatever you put in there, it kind of slowly scans through. Of course, that's just the saw wave. And then secondly, we have it pitched down 3 octaves, and the reason for that is if it's set to like the initial octave and it's all up in the high ranges, those two wavetables sound pretty similar. But then if you show them 3 octaves down, you can hear how one is much more low mid heavy and the other one has a lot more high frequency information. And that's because your fundamental harmonic is going to be what your octave control is setting. So if your fundamental is way high up in the spectrum, your ears don't do as good of a job of differentiating those different frequencies as they do with the lower set fundamental harmonic. So like if your fundamental is the sub note, there's a lot more of the spectrum that you can hear. You know, humans can only hear up to about 20 kilohertz. So it just gives you the ability to differentiate the changes in the wavetable better. So that's the first big tip that I will say. And then from there, let's go into the ways that, you know, you can make a wavetable that I've found. And so the first and worst way is going to be text-to-speech generation. And I'm going to turn this down a little bit, but so that I typed in hello and it's just a bunch of garbled nonsense. I've tried a lot of different words. Some of them sound better than others. So that one actually kind of sounds like the word, but again, it's not that good of a text-to-speech generator. If you're trying to do that to like get a sample out of it, I would just use an online one. Don't waste your time with this one. And yeah, that's going to be the worst way. I don't want to spend too much time on it. So let's go ahead and move into what I think are the usable ways to make a wavetable. So the rest of these ways I would say are workable in one way or the other. And this first one is going to be the most useless, but I did end up finding a way that it can work out, and that's the PNG image to wavetable. So as you can see here, if I import a PNG, the pixel luminance maps to the amplitude, and what that means is if we click here, we can kind of see that the bright side of his face is going up in the wavetable and the dark side is going down. So that's what is happening when you do it. And of course, like color doesn't matter, right? Brightness here is the same as brightness here. So let's go into one of my biggest pet peeves with these wavetable videos that I found. And it was people who were like, as soon as the PNG feature came out, there was like 10 different channels that, or a ton of different channels in like 2018 that all did oh, you can do this now. And they show like the most useless way to get a wavetable out of this. And that's like an image with a small and empty background. So you don't want to use small and empty, because then the majority of your wavetable isn't even anything, right? So don't use that. Secondly, I had an issue where there was these little squares. I'm using PNGs for this, and I'm like, why do these all have these little squares? I must have spent the first hour of my video being like, why are 50% of these things that I'm downloading all having little squares, like square waves in the image? And if you think about it for a second, you'll realize that I've been trolled, and I fucking hate whoever's doing this. Fuck y'all. This is the lamest troll of all time. You're unoriginal. Your troll is played out, or you're too stupid to know how to upload a thing with a transparent background. Either way, no pity for you. I'm sorry that your life ended up this way. You've wasted my time, and you should feel great shame for that. Whether it's trolling or stupidity, shame on you. Keeping it moving forward, still in the what not to use folder, and we're almost done with this one. If you see with the Peppa that we have here, you get the Peppa image, but since it's all flat colors, right? You know, it's all one shade of pink, another shade of pink, all another shade of red. Very simple, no gradation to the color and brightness. You just end up with a bunch of different squares again. And same thing with this. I was like, well, maybe if I draw a triangle, I'll get a triangle wave. I know that's stupid now, but at the time it seemed like, oh yeah, this is going to be the trick. I'm going to figure out the secret use to this. And no, it's just a bunch of squares. Again, maybe have one wavetable of that, but I would just recommend not to use any of those things that I said stay away from. So now let's move into, with the PNGs, what does actually work quite a bit. And this was the main bulk of what I ended up figuring out. Is all of the wavetables from PNG, for the longest time, they all are just noisy, not musical. And these are like the examples of the good things that I could find, right? Some of them are just terrible, but like they all ended up being super noisy and super, not, you know, there's no square wave. There's not a good fundamental. It's just a lot of randomness. But that was what I ended up figuring kind of made the best sound here. Like in this one too, I will say black and white images can give some really interesting wavetables, because as you can see here, look at how loud this whole wavetable is if I scan through it. It's because it's all luminance and it's all darkness. Then I did find you can get a little bit better by like having single toned shapes. So like this girl that's eating a cricket, right? Since it's mostly the same tone of her face and like the brightness in the background is kind of similar. That one ended up with a pretty good wavetable. And then again here with this yee looking ass motherfucker, he made a strangely good wavetable. Or at least a strangely not overly noisy one. But I did find, and this is what I will say for PNGs, there is a best PNG format to use, and it's in here. And I just don't know why. I can give some guesses, but fractals, for what PNGs do, fractals make the best version of that, right? And what I mean by that is like PNGs are not going to make really good, you know, wavetables that have this one cycle that's like kind of growly and then another one that's kind of like this or that, or like kind of plucky. No PNGs come out looking sounding musical because they're all made to look at, right? But what they do end up doing sometimes is being really noisy and interesting in a way that I think only PNGs can do. So even though this is the worst way, I'll say if you go and get some fractal pictures, they're the most extreme version of what a PNG is good at. Right? And you know, just these are just pictures, and it's all, I just typed in fractals and started downloading PNGs. You know, this one was interestingly good, right? Like you wouldn't think this comes out to a good wavetable, but you already heard that, so I won't spend more time on it. So again, they're not really the most usable, but I would recommend, if you're going to do PNGs, try computer generated images or natural photographs that are mostly of a subject and not a background, right? Because this one you can see the background a lot, and it ends up just being kind of noisy from that. So that's my rant, or my bit on PNGs, and that's gonna be the longest that I spend on one that's not that good. But I just spent a lot of time trying to figure out a way to get those to work. So moving on from there, I'm gonna go to what I think is the you know, next worst way. I think we're on the third way now, and that is drawing your own wavetables. Now, there's a lot of other tutorials, and I think people do a good job of covering this method, which is strange because it's one of the worst methods. It's a good method, but it's so labor intensive. First, I'll go ahead and say we'll use a different one of these. As many people have showed in other tutorials of this, if you hold Alt and drag a whatchamacallit, an LFO that you've drawn a curve into, you can quickly get a wavetable out of that. Then I'll say the only tips that I want to give on this are you can also set the grid to 0 here and freehand your wavetable. I'm going to change the grid here to 0 too. Maybe that's messing me up. But then, yeah, then you can freehand your wavetable, and that's good for getting kind of smoother wavetables. There's also, you know, if you look at the other tutorials, there's like functions to merge your different curves together like that. That's not the cleanest way to do it, but you know, you can use all the tools that are there. But again, it's not a great way. Then lastly, like, because what you'll have to do is you'll have to draw one cycle and then draw another cycle and LFO between them. So this is maybe a good way to get single cycles, but not full ones. Then lastly, I'll just say if you're doing this method, turn you know, and you want a noisier wavetable, turn all your grids to 0, or just turn the grid snap to 0. You can do that by just grabbing grid too, and then turn the noise on, and you can click it. Whoops. I'm sorry, turn it to 1, not to 0. Then you can click your wavetable, scroll up for more noise, scroll down for less noise, and instantly add noise to your whole table at the same time. The most useful thing I would say about using this method is it's good for modifying wavetables that you may have gotten out of like a sample or something like that. So it's useful to know, not that good as like a source. Okay, so our next method is going to be one of the ones that I would start to say this is quite a useful method. So what we have here are the menu options. So let me go in and get a preset that I have. Oh, sorry, that's kind of loud, but just any preset that you have that sounds good already, you can go in here and say resample to oscillator A or B, or A and B stereo. So I'm going to do resample to A and initialize all my modulations. And as you can see here, we've taken this kind of crazy sounding patch already and turned it into just, I would say, quite a usable I think great for tear out wavetable. So we have a tear out patch that's turned into a decent tear out wavetable, and it works well with most patches. So let me see what other one I want to try here. Let's do this one. So doing the same exact process, and I'm not going to play this one, but we'll just look through it. Oh, I'll play it with the. As you can see, just one quick thing and we already have a new type of sound, and probably with a slight bit of editing, like removing this tail where there's nothing on it and the beginning, another good wavetable. That's going to be the first really usable method, I would say, to get quick wavetables. Then we have another really good method here, and I haven't seen anybody do this, but I might be wrong. And that is using these render oscillator A warp and B warp in a useful way. So like I've seen people talk about these. So what we've done here is we've taken our wavetable, turned on a warp mode, then gone, and then as you can see here, if I change the warp mode, that's what it looks like. And then if I go in and render oscillator A warp, now our warp mode is the wavetable position. And you can even set a different type of warp on here. So we'll do asymmetrical now and just set it to a random position. Now if I go in here and get the same wavetable, but before I did anything to it, I can use these processing tools right here, the set spectra from other oscillator, set phases from other oscillator, and subtract spectra from other oscillator, to really quickly and easily get a different version of the same wavetable, right? And you could probably do a lot of editing. This one's going to be quite different. And if I gain separately. Really kind of strange, and there's no fundamental in this wavetable because it's subtracted it out. But you can do that and try it on a lot of different wavetables, and you're going to get some interesting results from that. So just a quick tip, and that's the way that I like to use the render oscillator A warp and B warp, is to use it to set the spectra from the other wavetable. So nice, quick, easy, good way to get interesting kind of phasey type sounds. Now the fourth way that I use, I'm not going to show anything of, but it's really, I mean, I guess I'll just, yeah, I'm not even going to show it because you'll know what to do as soon as I explain it. You just take other wavetable synthesizers, like Massive X has some super cool wavetables, even though it's not that usable. render, you know, do a cycle of it. I guess I could show just real quick. I would pitch it down you know, couple of octaves. I'm gonna go to 48 here. Maybe we'll go up an octave. So then you can take that, render it into an audio file, pretty short one, right? And we'll talk about that more in a minute, but then just load that in and basically steal wavetables from other synthesizers. I'm not going to show that too much, but you get the idea there. It's nice and quick and easy. Or especially using other synths to make wavetables for a different synth, you can get some really good sounds. I have a good couple of wavetables in my file batch that are like from using different, I think different, yeah, like Playdip. That's the exact one that I was just showing right there. That was what I ended up making out of this wavetable in Massive X. So, okay, so moving into my final and I would say best method for getting wavetables, and that's of course doing audio to wavetables. And so I know y'all all know that you can do this. So I mainly want to talk here about what I do and what I'm aiming for and the different types of sounds that I use and then the small processing that I do on them to get the best sound out of them. So first and foremost, I'll say when I'm doing wavetables, I'm aiming for one of two things. It's either a single cycle, you know, a single set of tables that goes and makes one sound, or a very widely varied table that has a bunch of sounds. So if I load in here, like Calypso is an example of one where I'm trying to get a lot of different tones. Right, so that's like the first thing that I'll, or that's one of the two things that I'll try and do. And the other one is trying to get a single sound. I'm just really trying to get that one, almost like pluck out of it, or sometimes it's a growl one shot or something like that. And so typically when I load one in and I'm trying to get a one shot out of it, I'll use a pluck, a growl one shot, or something like that. And then I'll go in here and scan through and go to what I think is the last useful cycle. So I'd say that one's probably the last useful one. Then go to the next cycle, add remove, and then select remove selected to end. And what that's going to do is end me up with this. That one kind of single cycle of a sound, or single set of wavetables of a sound. And as you can see, there's not only like a tonal change where these beginning ones have a lot more high harmonics and the ending one is just fundamental, but also the lower volume here of the end. So I'm getting like volume shaping as well as like tone shaping in my wavetable, and that can be useful a lot of times. And then once I have this, you know, I might go in here, do a spectral morph, and then do a max for all frames, which means it's not going to make the end louder, it's going to keep the end quiet. And what that does is just renders out all of my frames, all of the frames of the wavetable there. And so that's one of the, you know, first types of tables that I'll do. So the next thing that I'm usually trying to do, right, the next thing that I'm like intending to get out of the wavetables with the various multi-tone waveforms, I tend to find you can get the best stuff out of that by using other people's or your own bass one shots. But I even think using other people's is better because you know how to make your sounds, and by like making your sound and then making another sound out of your sound, you're kind of going down one route where you're doing the same tricks over and over again. If you're trying to hone in on your specific sound, do your own sounds. But like if you're trying to get a variation and some variety in what you're doing, use other people's sounds. You can do whatever you want with these, especially because it's like I downloaded these from Splice, so like now I'm not only can I use it as a sample, but I can use it as a tool to get other cooler sounds out of. So like if I'm trying to get a very different varying wavetable, as you can see we have a lot of different tones in there. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to spectral morph between these, and then I'm going to gain them all separately, and that's important so that it's equally loud in the different places. Then I'm not even going to listen to it. I'm just going to go in and reduce to 16. Now I'll go in and I'll go ahead and show what we have at this point. Now we have a wavetable with a ton of different interesting cycles to it. You know, it's an AU5 thing, so it's somebody who is great at sound design made this, and now we're just kind of doing some editing to his process to get our own slightly different thing going here. So I'm going to go in, spectral morph it again, and then I'm going to gain it separately again, right? And so now we have a different wavetable than just this sound, right? So you just end up with this table that's a lot of different tones that you can definitely get something useful out of. And again, when you're using this, you're not going to want to have a big full table morph, right? You want to pick a little section out of it. Maybe a little more. So it's like you have a bunch of different wavetables in one. So that's one way to get one of those. So we'll go back to my first method for a second. And as you can see here, I got an Elider wavetable that's kind of repetitive. You know, it's doing the same thing a couple times. So what I would do here is, you know, we have our first section of it, and I'll scan through it. And I'd say that's where the end of that section of the sound is. So now I'm going to go in, remove the selected to end, and do the same process. And then here, if we did that same process, which I'm not going to do, we kind of have, well, I would maybe go in here and edit some more, but we have another single wavetable to use. So again, you know, you don't have to just pick one shots to do that. You just have to get one shot of the sound selected out. Then another sample set that I tend to find is pretty useful is using effects, right? Or effect samples. So like if I get this glitch sample here, and listen to it, it doesn't sound that great, but if I go in and normalize each of these frames separately, as you can see, we've gotten a really interesting table pretty quickly. And I would probably go in and change how many of the frames. So like cut down again the, you know, number of frames that we have in here. I'm not going to show that because I just showed it. But, you know, again, using effects can be a good way to get interesting tones that aren't just kind of sounding like an AU5 sound or something like that. You know, it gets a little more unique there. And lastly, I would say respaces can be really good for this. So we've loaded that sample in. And it's nice. I think the first thing that I'll do is go into the tail here and remove that tail. So remove selected to end once again. And then this time, instead of picking a bunch of wavetables, I'm just going to kind of scan through and get a couple cool ones. So I'm just going to pick a couple frames out of here. We'll say this one will be our first one, so we'll remove all the ones before it. So beginning to selected, we have our first. Now I'll pick another one. Let's say that's going to be our next one. So I have to go in here manually now and pick these frames out and remove multi-selection. So we have 1, 2. Then let's go in here. I'll say that's going to be my next one. So then I already have 1, 2, and this can get complicated if you start doing too many frames, but we'll maybe finish it with one more. So we have 3. And I'll say that's going to be my last one. So we'll remove all, the first 3 are being left, and we'll remove all those. So now we have 4 frames here. And instead of just going in and immediately spectrally fading between these or whatever, let's go in and do one of the tricks from earlier in the video to where I'm going to add, I'm going to add some noise. Let me undo that. I'm going to add some noise with the grid mode on 1 to this one. And a little bit to this one. Oh, no. Well, for some reason, it's trying to override the wavetable with the first one. So let's go ahead and gain separately, and then it should maybe allow us to do that. Yeah, I don't know why it was trying to get crazy there for a second. And then we'll gain them separately again. Now I'm going to spectrally fade them, and we'll not even morph it this time and just see what we ended up with here. So then if you want to get really crazy, you can load a different wavetable into your other oscillator. I'm going to gain max for all these. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm going to gain separately on this. And then go in. And you can cut. So actually we'll do copy. Go into my other wavetable. We have to insert a fresh wavetable here. So I'm going to have to remove the morph tables, then add a fresh wavetable, then paste it in there. Then I can move the order. Go in, get another frame out of here. I'll say this one. Copy that. Go into my other wavetable. Add a fresh one. Okay, and it added it right there, which is perfect. Then we'll paste it in there, then move it here. And then now if we go in and morph it, and I'll go ahead and gain them separately this time. Now we have quickly gotten quite an interesting wavetable, and I would say definitely a usable wavetable at this point. So you can mix things together to make different wavetables and do stuff much quicker than like if you're going in and doing it one at a time and getting happy accidents too. So lastly, before we close this one out, I want to talk about one tip that I have found works really well. And that's going to be if you're using your own sounds to make wavetables. Let me load my initialized patch. And oh no, I already have a preset up for this. So if you're using your own patch, if I go in, take the sample that sounds like that, run it through heavy processing where I'm doing two different things to it, right? I'm boosting the sub a significant amount, and I'm also running it through a clipper. So those two things are making it just brighter, louder in the sub frequency, so a stronger fundamental. You end up with, that's the first wavetable. Oh, and I've also cut the tail off, so I'm kind of pre-processing it there by removing all those frames, making it way louder. Then I end up with quite a better wavetable almost instantaneously. So at that higher speed, you can see just by slamming it out and making the fundamental stronger, I would say you end up with better usable wavetables, especially for dubstep. So that's going to be my last tip. And with that, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and end this one. I will say before closing it out, do a bunch of different crazy things though, because most of these techniques that I got, came from either breaking rules that I was like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Like I think I saw an Odd Prophet video where he was just using fully mastered songs of his, or maybe it was somebody else's, but it might have been of his, that he was loading in and making wavetables out of that. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's like a little bit in a gray area of what you should legally do to make wavetables, but like try everything. I think that for me, if it's a badass song, like if I was to find out that Murata was doing that trick to make his tracks, good, because I'd rather him have those tracks than me not get to listen to those tracks, even if the methods are like questionable or it's like, oh, that's breaking the rules. So I'll say try everything, do crazy stuff. Don't let my video limit what you're trying to do, but I just hope that it adds some to your toolkit of what you can do. And so with that being said, go download the wavetables in the folder, and I will see y'all in the next one. Thanks for watching.